Hi there. Today we're going to talk about string bending. We'll start with the basics, then we'll go to a warm-up, and then we'll have more of the advanced techniques of some of the stuff that I've always heard and listened to in some of my favorite players, and now I've incorporated into my own playing. I really hope that you stick around for the whole video because we're going to cover a lot of ground, and hopefully you can eventually use these techniques in your own solo work and add a lot of color and spice to your playing. So, let's go ahead and get right into it. Alright, today we're going to be in the key of C, and I have just a couple warm-ups for you before we get started with the techniques. First, I would practice your half bends and your full bends. So in this case, we're going to bend up to this C note on the 13th fret of the B string. And we'll start with a full bend. And I encourage you to try vibrato, but then also try just without. Just a straight bend up a full step. Then let's try our half bends. So we'll actually move up one fret, and then we'll bend a half note to get to that C on the 13th fret. I would practice your bends back and forth just like that, and once you're feeling comfortable, I would try one of two things. The first thing is practice with a tuner. Now what I mean by that is, if you have a tuner that has some kind of dial that will show you flat or sharp, it can be very helpful to see how accurately you're bending. In this case, I have a Polytune 3 that I'm going to turn on. You're not going to hear the amp anymore, and instead it's going to feed right into the tuner. What's nice about this is when I bend, I can actually see how close I am to being directly on the note. So in this case, I'm bending up to a C, and what's nice about this tuner is, doesn't matter where I am on the fretboard, it knows what note I'm trying to hit. So in this case, when I bend up to that C, I can see, oh look, I'm a little flat there. So I need to bend just a little bit harder to get me to that perfectly in tune C. Now the same thing goes, maybe I bend too hard. It's going to show me, oh man, I am really sharp. So I need to actually tone it down just a bit so I can get to that nice perfect C right about there. Now of course, notes are going to die when you hit them on the fretboard. By that I mean the sustain will only last for so long, so depending on the guitar, over time it's eventually going to go flat. Now some guitars are better than others, so don't worry about being super precise. Just focus on what it's like, especially the muscle memory, to hit perfectly on that note. You're training both your ear, but more importantly your fingers to bend to that note and really get that muscle movement down so that you know what it's like to bend to that C. The second exercise is more for your ear. In this case, this is going to train your ear on what's sharp versus flat and what's perfectly in tune. In this case, we're going to use octaves. I'm going to go up to the high E string and find my other C, in which case that's on the 8th fret here. So what I can do is on the B string, I can bend up to my C and then check my accuracy by also hitting with my first finger the high E string. And that will make an octave. I can hear that these are in sync. We pretty much have the same note being struck on the guitar. Now you can argue it's a little flat, a little sharp, but the most important thing is, how does it sound to your ear? To me that sounds pretty good. But what if I do a little bit less? It sounds pretty bad. That's because you're getting that dissonant sound between the perfect C and an almost C. In this case, a flat C. It's important to learn what that sounds like because it's not all bad. Some players like to have a very dissonant sound. In my case, it's good to know because I want to bend up a little bit more so I can get to that perfect C. The same goes when the note is sharp. If I bend too hard, I now have that really dissonant, sharp sound, and I need to bring it down to now get it in tune. This is really good for your ear to just train on what's sharp, what's flat, and how can I use that to get to the note that I want. Whether maybe you want a sharp note or you want a flat note, but if you want a perfectly in tune note or somewhere around there, this is a great way to practice. So, once you're done practicing your bends, we can actually start with the different techniques. All right, let's start with our first bend. The first bend we're going to do is called a slide in bend. Now that's just the name I gave it. I'm sure there's a different name out there, but that's just what I have always called it. I don't see a lot of players using this bend a whole lot. I see it in the blues, but I don't really see it in many other genres of music. And I like to see it used a bit more because I think it's very expressive, very colorful. The moment that you hear it, it has a very whining, expressive sound to it. So let me show you what it's like, and then we'll break it down on how to actually play it. And one more time. So, as you can hear, it has a very whining, crying guitar bend sound. I really like that the simple bend by sliding into it can just add so much more than just a straight bend upwards. So how do we do it? Well, obviously there's a slide in, as you saw. It doesn't really matter where you pick on the fretboard. I usually do somewhere around the top of the neck. It doesn't matter the key because I'm really just sliding into the note. Now I want to have a target note. In this case, my target note for bending is the B flat. My actual target note that I'm trying to bend up to is a C. But to get to there, I need to get to my B flat and bend up. So in that case, I'm going to do a slide. And right around when I get to the B flat, I need to be ready to bend all in one fluid motion. Now what I think really helps to make this bend possible is to start bending right around a fret or two before you get to the B flat. So when I'm sliding up right around the 9th or 10th fret, I'm just going to ever so slightly bend up. So in slow motion, which is going to sound nothing like the real bend, but it's good to see, right around here, I'm going to start bending, and then I'm going to slide in and do the full bend. So, slow again. Loses a lot of the sustain on slow motion, so I'll do it fast. I encourage you when you're practicing this, go with different speeds. See what speed you think sounds best. There's many different ways you can do this. You don't have to go fast slide. You can do a slower slide. The point is to make it just sound fluid and really get, again, that whining sound of just bending up into it. I suggest first, bend to the C, make up some lick, and then repeat it, but with your new bend in mind. Let me show you a quick example of what this is like in a solo setting, and then we can move on to the next technique. All right, for this next technique, I want to show you a Hendrix style bend. Let me show you. One more time. What's really cool about this bend is that it's got two notes. It's almost like a double stop bend, and you get to choose when you hit that second note. You can do this on any of the strings, but I happen to choose the B string and the G string. What's really going on here is that I'm bending up a whole step, and then as you notice here, my finger is already catching the G string, which is the note directly above the note that I'm bending. And then all I have to do is just push down just a hair. It's just a fraction on your middle finger, and you'll catch that G string. Now it's going to be a bit of a half bend, so you have the incorporation of a full bend from the B string with a half bend of the G string. The sound you get is this. Now, I encourage you, when you hit both notes, bring it down. Descend down slowly, and you'll get kind of a whining sound as you slowly bend down to the original note. Now, I like to end on a single note. I think that completes the phrase a little bit better than just bending and descending down to the note. Let me show you what that looks like real quick. You'll notice that it loses a lot of sustain. Now, of course, you can push a bit harder and you can get a bit more out of it, but I usually like to just bend the note and then end somewhere on a single note that kind of completes that phrase. So we can do this on any of the strings. I'll show you real quick that we can do it on the high E and then grab that B string and pull it down. Let me show you real quick. Same concept. I'll do it real quick on the G string and then grab that D string right above it. You have a lot of options here. You can add as many notes as you want to this. So for example, if you wanted to bend up and grab all the strings you can, I encourage you to experiment with this. Grab as many strings as you can with just your one bending finger and play around with bending up and down as you work with this technique. Another really cool thing about grabbing notes is that you can actually start the bend by already grabbing the notes. So what I mean by that is that when we first did this technique, we bent up, then we grabbed the note, and we pulled down. But we can actually do the opposite, where we start bent, grab both notes at the same time, and pull down. That sounds like this. You don't get the ascent of bending on the first single string. You simply get the double stop motion downwards. Let me show you this in context real quick, and then we can move on to the next technique. Now I want to talk about overbending and underbending. Overbending is when you bend a note slightly sharp. Underbending is when you bend a note slightly flat. Now, a guitar has all the intervals that a keyboard player has. However, we have the intervals in between frets. So we have a C, we have a C sharp, but we also have all the intervals in between that by just bending up half a step. Listen to all those different sounds that you can get just by bending in between intervals. Well, let's apply that in a solo context so that way when we're bending, we can add a little bit of extra color by going sharp or flat. Let me show you what it's like to go slightly sharp on a bend. You can hear at the end of the bend that I slightly pushed higher to go sharp. I didn't quite go to a C sharp. I didn't quite go to a C. I went somewhere in between. And it's really cool because it adds a little bit of extra color. It clearly shows that you wanted more out of the bend, but you didn't do anything special other than just go slightly sharp. Now the same applies when you want to go flat. If I bend up to a note and then come down, I can go slightly flat. You notice that I ever so slightly paused. I bent up, and then right there, I kind of released. And now I'm in like a weird gray zone where I'm flat on my C note, but I'm not quite to a C flat or a B. So that's another way that you can incorporate going high and low on a bend without necessarily having to be in perfect pitch on every single bend. Let me show you what this looks like in a solo setting, and then we can move on to the next technique. In this section, I want to talk about using volume with bends. For Stratocaster players, this is really easy. You can use the volume knob on your guitar to move the volume up and down as you're playing. Let me show you what that looks like. One more time there. Now what's really nice about this is that I can use my 3 fingers that aren't holding the pick to move the knob up and down. It's really important that you keep the motion fluid. You want to have an easy ascent and then descent of your volume throughout the entire period of the bend. There's really not much to the technique. You're simply going to bend up whatever interval you want and then move the volume knob accordingly. Again, really practice a fluid motion going all the way up and then all the way down. Now if you're using a Gretsch or a Gibson or some other guitar, maybe a semi-hollow body that's a bit bigger, that has the knobs farther down, you're going to want to use a volume pedal. And in that case you want to practice with your feet of actually controlling that ascent and descent of volume throughout the entire bend. Either way, the technique is relatively simple, and it's going to be up to you to experiment and decide where you want to fit it into your playing. Let me show you a quick example of how I use it in the context of a blues, and then we can move on to the next technique. Well, that's the end of the lesson. We covered a lot of ground today. We talked about sliding into a bend, Hendrix style pull down bends, overbending, underbending, and also using volume swells when you bend notes. There's really a lot to unpack there, so I hope you practice and incorporate it into your playing in a very fluid manner. Now, I want to jam. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to play a little rhythm guitar for you. We'll play a blues in the key of C, and for those of you that would like to stick around and practice with me, I encourage you, play this back. See if you can play some of the bending techniques that we just went over a blues style backing track. For the rest of you, you're welcome to go, and I appreciate you watching this lesson. But for the rest of us, let's go jam a bit before we wrap up. All right, let's do a blues in the key of C, about medium tempo, and we'll do 2 choruses, and you can practice all the bending that we just went over. I'll have the chords right here if you get lost, so let's do it. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4.